Good day, grade 8s. Today we're looking at EMS Term 1 revision. Okay, so we're starting off with governments. So we're having a look at different types of governments, what governments do, and some legislation. Alright, so let's start with, we're looking at the difference between autocratic and democratic governments. So an autocratic government, the word auto means self, which means that the president or dictator usually makes the decisions himself, and the people of the country is not consulted in decision making. Alright, then we're looking at democratic. So the word demo means people. So democratic, the people vote for a president. Okay, so a democratic government is what we've got at the moment. There are some autocratic governments. One of the most noteworthy is North Korea, and most other countries. A lot of other countries in the world are democratic. We still have some autocratic systems in parts of Africa and South America as well. Alright, so we're continuing with governments. And let's have a look at legislature, okay? Laws, basically. So in South Africa, one of the problems that the government have is to fix mistakes of the past. So we're looking at, during apartheid, there was a lot of imbalances between the white population and the non-white population. So the government has put some laws into place to make sure that the imbalances of the past is corrected. Okay, the first one of those is BEE. That stands for Black Economic Empowerment. Okay, and that looks specifically at getting opportunities for black people. The Skills Development Act is an act, okay, let's say it's a law that it forces people and it forces companies to train workers. And then the Employment Equity Act is a law that makes workplaces more equal. Okay, so equity is equal, and it has a look at making sure that people with disabilities, women, people from all walks of life get equal opportunities in the workplace. Okay, so what are the tasks of government? What does a government do? Okay, so first of all, a government makes laws. So that is called the legislative duty of a government. So the laws usually get passed in Parliament, which is why Cape Town, that happens in Cape Town. So I hope you recall when you learned about the capital cities of South Africa, we learned that Cape Town was the legislative capital, because that's where the Parliament is and the laws gets made in Parliament. Then the executive government leads the people and leads businesses. And that is in Pretoria, so you can remember that in Pretoria we've got the Union Building where all the government offices are. Okay, so that's the leading part. Then they also have to make sure that justice is upheld. So basically that the laws that they made is actually in effect and that people don't break the law. And that is, so Bloemfontein is the judicial capital of South Africa, and that's in Bloemfontein because that's where the High Court is. Okay, so these ones are the three tasks of government: legislative, creating laws; executive, leading people and businesses; and judicial, making sure justice is upheld. Okay, now in order to perform these duties, the government needs an income. So where does the government get its income from? So let's first have a look at what is a budget. So a budget is basically tracking income and expenses. Okay, so we're having a look at what money is going to come in and how are we going to spend it. So if you make a personal budget, you look at what money you get in every month and you see how are you going to spend, what are you going to spend it on, so that you've got enough money to actually do everything that you need and want to do. So it's a planning and then also tracking the income and expenses as you go along. So we get a personal budget, which is basically what you do for yourself, but the national budget is what the government does for the country. So then we've got the Minister of Finance, who does the budget with his financial department, and that is basically looking at the income and expenses and where it is going to be spent on. So how does the government make money? So the government makes money mostly out of tax. Obviously they do have some other means as well, but we're specifically going to look at the tax. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is VAT. VAT stands for Value Added Tax. And that is if you buy something in the store, then they add tax onto everything that you buy. So if you buy a chocolate, then you pay VAT on that. The VAT in South Africa at the moment is 15%. So on everything that you buy in the shop, you pay 15% extra that goes towards the government. Some things are not taxable, like bread, for example, and yeah, so that you don't pay VAT on because it's the basic need of everybody. All right, we have sin tax, which is basically if we're looking at the sins, so things that's not good for you to do. So we get sugar tax. Sugar tax is quite high, so that's things like Coke and sweeties and things like that, where that has sugar in it. So the sugar tax is, I don't know if you've noticed, but in the last year or so, the things like Coke, you see Diet Coke everywhere and reduced sugar Coke. And the Coke has become more expensive. That's because of the sugar tax, because it gets more expensive to have sugar in your drinks. Okay, then the other sin tax is tax on alcohol and cigarettes. Alright, so it's things that's bad for you, basically. The sins. Then municipal tax is things you pay to the municipality. That you can ask your parents about what tax they pay on their property. If you own a house, for example, you need to pay tax on the property to the government, and that's municipal tax. Then personal income tax is the income that you earn per month. So on all the money that you get in for salary, wages, selling things, whatever you do, even getting gifts, it's a personal income and you have to pay tax on that. So the earnings of that, the tax on that depends on your earnings per month. If you earn less than more or less 6,000 Rand, it changes every now and then you don't have to pay tax. But the more money you earn per month, the more tax you have to pay. So we get different tax brackets where someone that earns a lot of money has to pay a bigger percentage tax than someone who doesn't earn a lot of money. And if you earn less than 6,000 Rand a month, then you don't need to pay tax at all. Now, every government has issues that it needs to address in the country. So let's specifically look at unemployment, which is one of South Africa's biggest problems. So first, let's just see why is there unemployment. Let's first look at what is unemployment. That's down here. There. What is unemployment? How do we calculate this? So we're looking at the amount of people who are of a working age. So people older than 18, because you're not allowed to work when you're younger. So people who are at the age of 18 or who are finished with school or university who needs to be able to work. So that is called the labor force. How many people can work? Let me add that in brackets. How many people can work? So we're looking at the unemployed people, and we're saying unemployed people divided by the amount of people who can work. And then we get, we want it as a percentage, so we times by 100. Times by 100 gives us a percentage. And that's how we work out what the unemployment rate is. So in South Africa, our unemployment rate is quite big. Let me quickly have a look and get you. So in 2019, the unemployment rate was 27%, which means that 27% of all the people who can work in South Africa don't have jobs. So what is the reason for it? Let's go back up here. What is the reason for unemployment? We have people who are looking for work and people who can't find work. So people who are looking for work, they were either fired or they were retrenched. Fired means if you didn't do your job well, then you lose your job. Retrenched is if the company cannot afford to pay you anymore, and then they usually give you a retrenchment package and say, we can't afford to pay you anymore, so unfortunately you have to leave, but we will give you X amount of money, or we'll give you your salary for a couple of months, but you can't work for us anymore. So that's retrenchment, and then they are looking for work, so they're unemployed because they don't have a job anymore. We also have people who finished studying and they're still looking for work. So they have the opportunity to get a job, but they're still busy looking for work. Then we have people who don't have a qualification, people who might be illiterate, and they struggle to get work because they don't have any skills or any qualifications that they can find work with. So these people are usually the people who are worst off of the bunch, because they might try to find work, but they're really struggling to find work. The rest of the people in this, most of them have qualifications, so it's easier for them to find jobs. Then we also have people with no opportunities. Let's say you're a physicist or a mathematician, and you're living in some tiny little town somewhere in the middle of let's say the Northern Cape. Nothing happens there. So you don't have the opportunity. What you studied, there aren't jobs available in the area where you stay. So people with no opportunities usually move to a bigger city or move to a place where there are opportunities for them. So what can we do about unemployment? So we looked at a bit further up, we had a look at the Skills Development Act. So first of all, we want to develop skills for this group of people with no qualifications. If they can get skills, it would be easier for them to find jobs. The other problem is we need to have job creation. So for the people who's been retrenched or finished their studies and they can't find work, or people with no opportunities for work, we need to create jobs for them. So one of the best ways we can create jobs is through entrepreneurship. So over here we're looking, why is entrepreneurship important? So entrepreneurship is important because we're lessening unemployment. If you can't find a job and you start your own business, then you earn an income and you're not unemployed anymore. So if these people who are fired or retrenched start their own business, then they are not unemployed anymore. People with no qualifications can start their own business in, let's say, even if you have no qualifications, you can learn how to work in a garden and start your own gardening company. So there are people who can create their jobs for themselves, which is entrepreneurship. Then, if you are an entrepreneur, you are also creating jobs for other people. So let's say we have a guy who created a garden service, then he has to hire people to work for him, which creates more jobs for the community. We can have a look at my school, for example. I didn't have a job. Why didn't I have a job? Because I didn't have opportunities. I studied something really random. So I didn't have the opportunities. And when I finished study and I was looking for work, so I decided I am going to start my own business. So I am taking my own unemployment away, but I'm also creating jobs for tutors. So that is why the entrepreneurship is important. So now we've got, I'm sure you've heard of sustainability. It's quite a buzzword at the moment because it's something very important to look at for the future of our planet. But linking up with this unemployment as well is we've got an economic problem. So the problem is we have limited resources, which means there's only a certain amount of resources available that we can possibly use. But we have unlimited needs. So what people want is unlimited. There's gonna keep being people, and we're gonna keep needing things. But we don't necessarily have enough resources. So resources is limited, but what people need is unlimited. And that creates a problem. How are we going to fulfill everybody's needs if the resources are limited? That we call the economic problem. Okay, so what are resources? So resources, we've got natural resources, which is naturally occurring things like water, land, coal, sunlight, sunlight, and wind, etc. Okay, so you can also remember from geography and from previous studies, something like coal is not renewable. So it's going to run out. So what we need to do to solve the economic problem is to look more at things like sunlight and wind that is renewable, that is not limited. That is the best way to solve the economic problem. Even things like water is limited. You might think, but it keeps raining. But where is that water coming from? Water is limited because there's only a certain amount of water on the planet. And most of that water is actually in the sea, so it's salty. So we can't drink it. And we can't give it to our plants and use it for our crops. So and the other thing is, the more we pollute the water, the less water we have available. So that means water is also limited. So there's a limited amount of land available. There's a limited amount of coal and water, and so many other resources is very limited. So to solve the economic problem, we have to start looking at unlimited resources like sunlight and wind that can power our needs. So what is sustainability? Sustainability is using resources to meet our needs in such a way that future generations will also be able to meet their needs. So sustainability is looking at us. We need to be able to look after ourselves and our needs, but we also have to make sure that in the future, people can look after their needs as well. So if we're looking at a self-sufficient community, that is a community that doesn't need anything from an external source. Self-sufficient communities are usually quite small. So you can think about a little fishing village where people grow the food they want. They fish the need they want. Maybe they hunt the need they want, the meat they want. And there's someone in the village who creates the clothes. There's people fixing things. Everything we need in the village happens within that village. We don't need to import anything. We don't need anything from anybody else. We can look after ourselves. Being self-sufficient is also becoming more and more important in order to be sustainable. For example, if you start a vegetable garden, then you don't need to buy vegetables. So it makes you more self-efficient. We've specifically seen in this lockdown time a lot of people were driven to be more self-sufficient because they were unable to buy things that they need. So for example, making your own clothes, growing your own food, baking your own bread, that kind of thing makes you more self-sufficient because you're not relying on other people to do it for you. We also have to look at caring for the government, so for the environment, so that our resources does not run out and that future resources does not run out. So how do we do this? Reduce, which means we use less. So instead of buying things that's made out of plastic, we use something else instead. Or instead of using a plastic bag to put your lunch in, you use a lunchbox. So you're reducing the amount of plastic that you use. Then reuse is we use the same thing again. So not necessarily washing out your plastic baggies and reusing them. I don't think that's a very good idea. But if you are, I have an idea. Like for example, for your car tires. What do they do with car tires after they are broken and you can't use them anymore? So they either use them, they cut them up in pieces and use them as ground coverings. You can make swings out of them and kids' toys. Some people even make shoe soles out of tires because it's rubber and it's very high quality rubber. So that means something that instead of throwing something away, you reuse it. And then recycle is if something goes through a process where we change it into something that's usable again. For example, if we take newspaper or any paper that you're throwing away and we make mulch, we clean it out and we make new paper with it. All right, so that was sustainability. Let's quickly look at the 4 factors of production. So these are important to know. It basically means there are 4 things that we can do to earn money. The first thing is labor. So the numeration means payment. So the payment that you get from labor is wages. So you work and get paid. Another way to get money is to own land. And then you can rent out your land to get money. Another thing is if you have money, you have capital, and you want to make it grow, you want to have more capital. So you can take that capital and invest it. And then you get interest on that investment and your capital grows. The other way that we can make money is to start your own business and make a profit. So we're looking at that when we're talking about entrepreneurship. We're not just talking about small industries that people start at home, but we're also looking at something like Microsoft. Microsoft was started by Bill Gates in his garage. So he's an entrepreneur that started a massive company and making profit out of it. The people who are working, okay, so let's take that example through. So Bill Gates started this company in his garage. So he's an entrepreneur. He employed people who got paid for their work. So that's labor. he either had to rent land so that he can, for his business premises. So the landlord, the person owning the land, got money. Then as he made more and more money, he can invest it to make his money grow. Or other people like me and you can buy shares in Microsoft and invest our money in his company, and we can make money out of that. So that's the 4 factors of production, which has to do with how people get money. That is your term 1 revision. Not bad, all fits on one page. So that is what you need to go have a look for your test.